All right, so we are going to look at the CAN models and looking at how to like emphasize or show growth rates on a chart on PowerPoint. Okay, so first looking at the CAN model. So you got three documents. One of them was the empty version of the UCF file. The other one is the complete version of the UCF file. And the other one is something called CAN models. So CAN model is just going to be like a 3-in-1 model. So first looking at the free cash flow to equity model. If I were to do this, I'm trying to essentially argue that my cash flows are going to grow. So if these are example inputs for NVIDIA. So before we talk about any of these things, let's look at everything beneath it. So first, cost of equity capital. So if you did your DCF, you input these numbers right, you should have a cost of equity capital that's going to populate over here once you did your DCF inputs, and it'll be right here. So you can go ahead and input whatever that number is right here. Your free cash flow to equity, you can go ahead and look that up, or you can calculate it, whichever you choose, you would input that there. And then you would get your new net debt, which I wrote down where to find this. So essentially, you take additional debt issuances and you subtract debt repayments, and that's your new net debt. And then interest on debt as well. So you can find this basically as insurance expense. Okay. And then looking at shares outstanding, you know where to find this on Refinitiv from the previous version, where we looked over here, and then we can see the amount of shares outstanding. Make sure that these values are currently not in millions, but your values have to all be the same. So this would have had to be in millions, and then these would have had to be in millions. Just make sure that you use the same units across the board. That's the most important thing. All right. Corporate tax rate, you can basically Google search this, or you can find it on Refinitiv. And that takes us through everything beneath this section. So let's talk a little bit about this section. So when it comes to deciding growth rates, you can do a few things. So you could put your CAGR, like your previous cash flow. So your cash flows from year, if your cash flows from this certain year to this certain year, and look at how you're going to grow those. So you would input your free cash flow to equity from, let's say, 5 years ago. So this would be like 2020 to 2024. And you would go ahead and input um, your free cash flow to equity here, free cash flow to equity here, and that would give you a growth rate. So you could go ahead and use that growth rate. Or you could maybe form a thesis of, I think it's going to grow at this rate. Or you could essentially look it up and see what analysts are saying and use that as your growth rate. Just understand why they're saying that. So you're going to say how many years it's going to be in that growth stage. So I think 3 is typically on the higher end of a conservative estimate. So if you're thinking anything longer than 3, you better have a really good reason for why it's going to be in that higher growth period. And then maybe you have a second stage growth rate where maybe the company has a lot of growth in the first 3 years. And then after that, it chills out a lot because you want to have maybe a conservative multiple, or you want to have a conservative case that we're arguing for. Or maybe we're like, oh no, it's still going to grow by like a really significant amount in the next 5 years after the 3. So first 3, it grows at 32, and then the next 5, it grows at 10. Like that's basically what we're arguing here. You could even have a stage 3 growth rate, which essentially is just like in perpetuity. And here I just said 2% because that's typically like the low side of nominal GDP growth. So that just means it would grow with US GDP. All right. So the growth path, I did constant. So you could do constant or linear. And the model will ask you this. And that's basically it. So the biggest part of your decision-making process is these numbers and understanding why and where you're getting them from. After that, we can basically click run, make sure your macros are enabled. So when it comes to enabling your macros, I'm going to go over here to file, then options. Then you want to go to trust center, and then you want to go to trust center settings. Then you want to go to macro settings. You want to make sure that they're enabled, enable VBA macros. And then if that's already enabled and your file still isn't running, it's still not working, you're going to want to go to the specific file. So here I have CAN models valuation. Then I'm going to right click it. Then I'm going to go to properties. And then over here, um, it would basically ask me like it would say like some things on this file are blocked for whatever, and I would click allow, like allow or unblock, and then I would click apply, and then okay, and I close it out. I don't have that because my file isn't being blocked. All right, so once you're squared away, to be able to click run, then it'll ask you, okay, what type of model are you doing? Well, we're doing the free cash flow to equity model, so that's three. And then how many growth stages? We did three growth stages. You probably should have at most two, to be fair. And then we're using constant growth. And then you want it to just read the input from the spreadsheet. And that would give us this as our target price. And we would basically take this and input this as our second valuation on the slide with like free cash flow to equity, and then this, and then you would also put these things into a table. So these assumptions into a table, along with the ones down here as well. And you have that on the screen to contextualize how you got this output. All right. Um, the other thing is, let's say I want to do a different kind of model, and maybe my company pays dividends. I could do a dividend discount model. So let's just click one and then just run all the way through. So we'll just click one until it gives us a dividend discount model. Ignore how ridiculous this is. I mean, it's pretty ridiculous. Um, because we didn't do the right inputs for that. So now we have the right questions to give the right inputs. So we can do dividends per share. Let's say it's like 102, something like that. Cost of equity, 9.2, we'll just leave it the same. Constant growth. Let's say we just have 2 years of growth. 1 year where our dividend is growing at 5%, and the other where our dividend is growing at 2%. And that's happening for 10 years. I don't know. These are just fake numbers. Your cost of equity, you know where to get it. It's the same thing. But when it comes to these numbers, what you could do is go over here to the compute CAGRs and use your dividends per share. So what was your dividends per share in 2020, your dividends per share in 2024, and then use that growth rate as either your stage two growth rate, if you're arguing that dividends are actually going to grow, or as your stage one growth rate, if you just want to hold that constant. And then you can essentially click run because these things don't matter for the dividend discount model. So we're going to click run. We're going to do a dividend discount model. We're going to do two stage, and we're going to do constant growth. And we'll read them from that. So it's obviously a lot lower, but these are kind of VS inputs, obviously not NVIDIA's actual inputs. But you would do the same thing, but that's just how you use the model. All right, the other thing is going to be, you don't need to use this. We have the version that's over here with the DCF inputs that'll give you WACC, and it'll give you WACC, that's right here, and then it'll give you your cost of equity, that's right here, just in case you want to know them. All right, so the other thing is going to be CAGRs. So this is the formula for a CAGR. You could learn it, or you could just use this and basically use it to compute your CAGRs. So let's say in 2020, we had specific revenues and we want to showcase on a visual our revenue CAGR. So what we're going to do is over here, we already have all of that data, right? So I already know my revenues year over year because I entered them all into here. And I can even see them over here if I wanted to. So let's say I go through and I just copy this, right? And let's say I put this into my personal sheet with all of my stock information and all that stuff that I've been keeping track of the whole time. Um, I would then just kind of paste this in there, and let's say I want to visualize this. So I'm going to click this. Maybe I'll get rid of the A. If you don't know how to get rid of the A, just retype it, or you can click Control 1 and then just delete the A. Sorry. You also have to delete the slash, and that'll do that. But I'm just going to keep the A for time purposes. Select this section, go to Insert, and then select the chart. So this is my revenue chart. I'd probably change this into accounting with 0 decimals. Oh, and then I also want the dollar sign. All right. So now I have a chart of my revenues. that I can put into PowerPoint. So let's say I made this pretty. I obviously didn't, but let's just assume I did. Let's say that. All right. Now it's also linked. So that's really nice. I can go over here and say, okay, in 2020, this was my revenue. Paste it here. And then in 2024, this was my revenue. And I can see my CAGR was 9.25. So I could insert, oh, just give her a minute. All right. I could insert a shape, maybe use like an arrow, maybe use like a thicker arrow, something like this. And then basically do something like this, make it a little prettier, hopefully, right? Maybe make it blend in with the back. I don't know. And then insert a text box. I think it was like what 9.63%. I would say maybe fill out bigger, a little bit of all of them. And then maybe I made it like red. And then I could basically like flip this, have that be either like on there or on there. I don't know. I could make it prettier, change the chart style, whatever. Obviously not something like this, maybe something like this. But the idea is that now I have like my CAGR there, or I could even write CAGR. But ultimately, it's kind of understood if you just leave it like that as well. Um, but you can write CAGR if you want to. But that's the idea. So now you have something to supplement your graphs to kind of contextualize them and say, well, revenue is growing at a compounded annual growth rate of 10.63%. And you have all the resources to do it in a relatively easy manner. Isn't that just so wonderful? All right, so that kind of runs us through the entirety of um the sheet, and that's it. All right, you guys. Yeah, if you have any questions, let me know.